Hi there, Richard Fulmer here. Welcome to another episode of Richard's Rock Rambles. So today we're going to have another look at a classic rock band, probably my favorite rock band of all time, and definitely one of the greatest rock bands that there ever was. Of course, I'm talking about Led Zeppelin, a band that were formed from members of the Yardbirds, who for a brief time were called the New Yardbirds, and two guys who were pretty much unknown, although they had been in a band called the Band of Joy. So I'm talking about Jimmy Page, who was a well-known session muso in England at the time. John Paul Jones, also a session muso. Robert Plant and John Bonham, and those two were in the Band of Joy. So these four guys got together, and they just clicked. They produced a sound which hadn't been heard before. The first album was pretty much blues based, but with a really great hard rock edge. And they just went from strength to strength. And it's said that in their first jam in the studio together, the first time these guys got together with each other, the magic was there and they were just laughing and they could see this is going to work. They were blessed with a John Bonham, who was a drummer of incredible power. When he got behind the kit, it was just amazing. Robert Plant, who had a vocal range which was incredible. He could do the soft stuff, he could do the really hard stuff, and he could scream when he needed to. Jimmy Page on guitar virtuoso, also became the producer for Led Zeppelin, a very accomplished arranger, composer, and John Paul Jones, great bass player as well as a keyboardist. So these four guys just had the right ingredients for the perfect mix. And not many albums, 8 studio albums, which is what I'm going to be ranking today. And please guys, just remember, this is my personal ranking of Led Zeppelin. It's not cast in stone. You guys might have a different ranking. Please, in the comments down below, let me know. It's great to see how you guys rank them. Some of my rankings might surprise long time Zepp followers. Doesn't go according to script, but then I don't think music's ever really like that. It's what it means to you personally. So I'm going to go from my least favorite to my favorite. But let me just say up front, there's not a bad Zeppelin album. I love all of these albums. It was quite difficult really to put one at the bottom and one at the top. But anyway, we'll have a look. I'll briefly chat about each album. I don't want to get too involved because then it just goes on and on and on. As I say, not 8 albums. There was another album that was released prior to them breaking up when Bonham unfortunately passed away. That was called Coda, which I'm not including in this batch because that's not really one of the official studio albums that came after he had passed. And also all of these studio albums are the remasters that Jimmy Page released in 2014 and 2015. I think he did them in batches of 2 or 3. Great job. The sound quality is amazing. The packaging is good. Of course, the only quibble I have with the CD packaging, of course, is everything is so small you can just about read it. I think there are some vinyl releases that were done around the same time. So let's get started and see how we do the rankings. So for me, coming in at number 8 is the very last studio album they did, called In Through the Outdoor. This is a very different Zeppelin. This is John Paul Jones's Led Zeppelin. A lot of synths on here, a lot of keyboards. Very much music of the time, I think. They were trying to update their sound because they had been away from the studio for some time. I think the last big tour they had was in 77, and this album came out in August 1979. So this was them trying to do something different. And you can hear in the songs in here, there's some sort of retro stuff in here as well, but there's a lot of updated sounds. The original vinyl came with a whole bunch of different covers. I think there were about 7 different covers. So this is the one, and you had the original cover there. They've done quite a nice packaging with this remasters. Interesting guy in the bar over there. And all these discs come with companion discs, so you've got previously unreleased Zeppelin, different outtakes, that kind of thing. After many years of hearing there was nothing left, suddenly Jimmy Page pulls out these things out of the hat, and lo and behold, you've got a whole bunch of extra Zeppelin, which for me was fantastic. So let's just go through some of the tracks here. See what we have. There's a great picture of Zeppelin in full flight. That I think was at Nebworth in 79. Let's just see what we have. Yeah, there's another great picture. So the tracks starts off with In the Evening, which is a sort of slow, brooding track. Starts off with the keyboards, as I said, John Paul Jones all over the place on this album. And Robert Plant comes in, great vocals. Southbound Suarez is the next track. Fool in the Rain, Hot Dog, which is more of a sort of a rock and roll kind of sound to it, still pretty cool. Carus Alhambra, which is a long instrumental, my favorite on this album. Some great synth work from John Paul Jones, sort of 3 different parts where it picks up towards the end. Great track. All My Love, which is another slow track. And I'm Gonna Crawl, produced by Jimmy Page, and as usual, the executive producer Peter Grant, who was obviously with the band right up until the end. It takes a while to get into. If you're used to the earlier Zeppelins, this one takes a few listens to get used to, but by no means a bad album. So that's my number 8, In Through the Outdoor. Good album. One can only imagine what they would have gone on to do. I think they probably, if they'd gone into the 80s, they probably would have had to refine their sound a bit for that particular era, and I think John Paul Jones would have played a pretty big role. So now my number 7, the one I'm going for, is Houses of the Holy. Some guys might rank this a bit higher, but some of the others for me just work a bit better. Tracks on here, the song remains the same, which was a hit for them. The Rain song, which is a beautiful track. Over the Hills and Far Away. The Crunge, Dancing Days, Jamaica, otherwise known as Jamaica, so it's got a nice reggae beat to it. A bit different for Zeppelin at the time. But it just shows you, these guys could do anything. They could do country, they could do rock, blues, reggae, you name it, and they did it well. No Quarter, which is my favorite track, broody keyboard intro, quite an eerie song with great vocals from Robert Plant, and finishing off with a song called The Ocean. They picked up quite a bit of flack for this album cover at the time, and I would imagine they'd pick up even more flack if they had to release this today. The companion disc has got The Song Remains the Same, a remix, the Rain song minus the piano, the Crunge, Dancing Days, so all the tracks with different mixes, which is quite cool to hear. There's a cool shot of the middle there. And of course there's Zeppelin with their very own Boeing that they used to travel around in. So that's my number 7, Houses of the Holy. Number 6, I'm going for Led Zeppelin 3. And when this came out, it was quite a shock for guys who really got into the first two, because this one was a lot more acoustic based. But it just showed you how versatile these guys were. They could do folksy stuff, they could do country tinge stuff. The first two were quite sort of bombastic, heavy blues, hard rock. And this was just another side to Zeppelin. A great album nonetheless. Immigrant Song, which is quite a heavy song, which starts off the album, sort of rampaging rock song. Friends, Celebration Day, which is a fantastic song. Since I've Been Loving You, which is one of the best blues songs you'll ever hear. They did a better one on this later on, but we'll get to that. Out on the Tiles, Gallows Pole, which is a great track. Tangerine, which is a very sort of hippie, folksy song of the time. Bronjar Stomp, That's the Way, and hats off to Roy Harper. Roy Harper, of course, was the other great artist that they knew from the time. I think Jimmy Page went on to produce a few of his albums. The companion disc is The Immigrant Song, Friends. These are all different versions. Jennings Farm Blues. There are some previously unreleased stuff on here, which is cool. So it's worthwhile checking out these remastered and reissued. And this one came out in 1970. Houses of the Holy, which I forgot to mention, this came out in 73. This came out in 1970. In fact, the early 70s, they were very prolific, releasing, I think in the 1 year, they released 2 albums. The first 2 albums were done in the same year. So that's Led Zeppelin 3. Then we get to my number 5, and that is Physical Graffiti, this magnum opus. This was just amazing. I mean, you had all sorts of styles on here. You had rock, you had blues, you had psychedelia, you had country stuff, you had everything that you would expect from Zeppelin you got with this album. And this came out in 1975, where they just peaked and they were just starting to go down. Still huge, I mean, selling out arenas everywhere. But I think 73 was their peak. Custard Pie on here, The Rover, In My Time of Dying, which is an incredibly moody track as well. Great vocals from Robert Plant and Jimmy Page on guitar, amazing stuff. The track Houses of the Holy, which you would have expected on the other album, but it actually appears on here. Trampled Underfoot and Kashmir, that epic, long song, very dramatic with lots of guitar and keyboard interludes. Then on the second disc, In the Light, Bronjar, Down by the Seaside, which is a cool sort of commercially sort of fun track, which is great. 10 Years Gone, Night Flight, The Wanton Song, Boogie with Stu, Black Country Woman, and Sick Again, which is quite an up-tempo rocker. This is an essential Zeppelin. Let me show you the actual cover there. This is a really cool cover, and they've done a great job with the reissues to get it to look like the original album cover of this tenement block in the States, which is quite groundbreaking for the time when covers still meant something for music. That's the great thing with vinyl. You could experience the cover as well as the music. So they are Physical Graffiti, an essential purchase if you want to get into Zeppelin. My number 4, for many people, might be their number 1. This was their biggest seller. Still today, people request songs from here, and this probably has their biggest hit ever. Of course, I'm talking about Led Zeppelin 4, or the Ruins album. Excuse me. So what do we have on here? We have some standout tracks, some classics. Black Dog starts it off, up-tempo rocker with the song Rock and Roll, which I think they started a lot of their concerts with, that particular track. The Battle of Evermore, Stairway to Heaven. I have to say that if I never hear that song again, it'll be too soon. I think it's been played to death. A great song with different parts, great lead guitar solo from Jimmy Page towards the end, but really I think it's been killed by radio. Misty Mountain Hop, 4 Sticks, which is a great track, Going to California, and When the Levee Breaks. And there's also a bonus disc with different versions of those tracks as well. There's a classic Inner Sleeve. There are the guys. Jimmy Page has a beard there. I think Robert Plant also had a beard around this time at some stage. And just one of the small crowds that Zeppelin used to get. So this album came out in 1971. As I said, in the early 70s, they were just pumping them out. And with each album, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't think we'll ever see the likes of Led Zeppelin again. So this one is a keeper. And yeah, as I said, some people might rank this a bit higher, but I just have more of a history with the next three. So my number 3 is Led Zeppelin 2, a heavy rocker. I mean, you start your album off with Whole Lotta Love, which is probably one of the best hard rock anthems of all time, along with Smoke on the Water and Paranoid from Black Sabbath. What Is and What Should Never Be, a great rock song with different parts to it, kind of bluesy. The Lemon Song, which is a good blues rocker. Thank You. Heartbreaker, which was another hit. Living Loving Maid, She's Just a Woman, which is in brackets. Ramble On, which is a great track. I love that's where I got my idea for Richard's Rock Rambles. Moby Dick, the drum solo from John Bonham, which is okay on the studio album, but really you had to see him live. That was where he really came to life. And Bring It On Home. It's a cool picture there. There's the guys. Hope you guys can see this. Yeah, so this album came out in 1969. That was when they started, and the first 2 albums just blew the doors open. People said, yeah, these guys are going to go far. Interesting cover as well. I think they picked up, not with this album, but the first one they picked up some flack from the Zeppelin family. I'm using the cover, but I'll show you now. Led Zeppelin 2, essential purchase. My number 2 is their first album, the debut of Led Zeppelin, one of the best debut albums of all time, along with the first Van Halen, the first Black Sabbath. This is probably right up there. And there's a lot of covers on here, and they've been, a lot of people have said, yeah, these guys were just borrowing from the old guys, but everybody borrows from somebody else in music. It's just one of those things. But they just took the blues rock sound to a different place with a lot of power. John Bonham's drumming on here is incredible. Robert Plant just singing up a storm, also playing the harmonica on here. Funny how a lot of the lead singers from that era also played harmonica. Ozzy Osbourne for Sabbath, Ian Gillan for Deep Purple, Robert Plant for Led Zeppelin, Mark Farner for Grand Funk. It was almost one of the things that you did as a lead singer. So there's some cool photographs of the guys there in the early stages. That was the photograph on the back of the original vinyl. Yeah, all very young and fresh-faced, going on to conquer the world. So the tracks is not a bad track on here. Good Times, Bad Times, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, which is a bluesy rocker. You Shook Me, another blues-based song. Dazed and Confused, which is a classic, which I think Jimmy, when they played it live, he used the bow on his guitar. Also has about three different parts. Speeds up towards the end, and that's when you just crank the volume. Your Time Is Gonna Come, Black Mountain Side, which is sort of like an Indian influence to Jimmy's playing on that track, which is great. Communication Breakdown, I Can't Quit You Baby, and How Many More Times. Absolute epic album. That's the cover that they picked up flat for from the Zeppelin family, I think. They would go on to pick up flat for lots of other things, but this was right in the beginning. This is an essential purchase. All of these are really, but this is definitely one. So we come to my number 1 Led Zeppelin album. The one that I have always turned to when I want to play Zeppelin. This is the one I reach for first. And it might surprise a lot of you, and you probably worked out which one it is. It's the album Presence. And this came out in 1976, March of 1976. Oh, by the way, this was also 1969. So this and the second one, both in the same year. So back to Presence. This album was done when the band were going through a lot of bad stuff. Robert Plant and his wife were involved in a car accident. His leg was in plaster at the time of this recording. I think shortly after this album was done, his son died in mysterious circumstances. So it's a very angry album. A lot of passion, very heavy guitar work. This is Jimmy Page's album. The last album they did with John Paul Jones was his. This is Jimmy Page's. Amazing guitar work on here. as well as some incredible drumming from John Bonham on here. Sorry, I'm talking too much. So what do we have on here? There's some great pictures of the guys as well, live shots. So let's get to the tracks. And this is my favorite. When I play this, the neighbors tend to want to run for the hills. Achilles' Last Stand starts it off. Also an epic track, lots of different parts to it. Great drumming, as I said. For Your Life, Royal Orleans, and my favorite track, Nobody's Fault But Mine, where there's a lot of the sort of stop-start drumming from John Bonham, the timing, almost prog-like, that track. In fact, a lot of the pieces on here are very progressive rock-like. Candy Store Rock, Hot's On For Nowhere, and my favorite blues track of Led Zeppelin, T for One. I actually prefer this to the earlier one on Led Zeppelin 3, which is Since I've Been Loving You, of course. I prefer T for One, just as something else. Yeah, as I said, there's not a bad track on this album. The production is amazing. Jimmy Page was involved with the production on all of Led Zeppelin, along with Peter Grant as the executive producer. And I must say, with these remasters, he did a really good job. He took a lot of time over it, because after all, I think Zeppelin is pretty much Jimmy Page's baby. He hasn't really done much since the demise of Led Zeppelin, unfortunately. I really wish he would, because he's a super talented guitarist. But yeah, you can hear how good he is on this album, on the guitar. Incredible lead breaks, great riffs, the whole 9 yards. So that's my number one, Presence. Might surprise quite a few of you. So then, I just want to mention a couple of books like I did with the Sabbath rankings. There's a book called Hammer of the Gods by Stephen Davis, famous book of Led Zeppelin, unauthorized by the band. There's some real juicy stuff in here. Richard Cole, the tour manager, is also quoted quite a bit in this book, and he was there when all the shenanigans were going on in the 70s. Trashing of hotels, throwing TV sets out windows, etc., etc. It's all in this book, so well worth checking out. There's some great photographs inside of the band and the crowd and what have you. There's a later picture of Jimmy and Robert. So yeah, one worth checking out, Hammer of the Gods. And the other one I want to quickly mention is one which came out more recently by another great rock writer, Mick Wall. I think I mentioned him in the Sabbath one. It's called Led Zeppelin, When Giants Walk the Earth. Really comprehensive history of Led Zeppelin, with a lot of crazy stories as well, and some great guitar work. There's Jimmy with his laser show. I think that was at the O2 when they got back together. And there he is in the 70s with his bow. He wasn't the original guy to do that. There are people that have done this before him, but he just showcased it so much better. So that's the other book to check out. And there we have it, Led Zeppelin, my favorite rock band of all time. You can't go wrong with any one of these albums. Try and get the remasters, because they really have done a good job with them. And yeah, like I said, I don't think we'll ever see a band like Zeppelin again. And I think times are such that those kind of bands are gone, and they are going to be just part of the rock and roll history. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please let me know what your rankings are down below. It'll be interesting to see how you guys rank Zeppelin as compared to my ranking. And I'll see you guys again next time, and have another look at another classic rock band. I might do a solo artist for a change. And then we'll see who that's going to be next time. Please guys, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you again soon. Cheers.